Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by you, the listener of the show. If you support us on Patreon, thank you so much for your support. And if you want to become a Patreon supporter, you can sign up at www.patreon.com/theworldwanderers. In return for your support, we send lots of great goodies and gifts, including exotic postcards from somewhere surprise around the world, as well as one-on-one hangouts with Ryan and myself. Now, as always, thank you so much for your support. And so for today's episode of the podcast, we have an awesome interview with Amanda Hathorn-Geary, who is a cruise ship specialist. And we're going to jump right into that interview. So without further ado, here's Amanda. All right, so we are super excited to be joined by Amanda Hathorn-Geary today, and she is a cruise ship employment specialist, and she's the first person we've had on the podcast who specializes in anything around cruise ships. So Ryan's never taken a cruise. I've only taken one cruise before. So Amanda, welcome to the show. We're super excited to have you here.
Well, thanks so much, guys. I am super excited to be here, too. So thanks so much for having me.
Of course. And on top of sharing the same name, you are also Canadian, which is super cool.
I know, right? Yeah, so it's all Canadians, all Amandas. That's like everyone in Canada is named Amanda. We'll just go with that.
Every female Canadian's named Amanda.
Yeah.
The Amanda child policy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we were thinking we would start with, I guess, backing up probably like at least 15 years or so. How did you first decide that you wanted to work on a cruise ship?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I actually started my first time at sea, at age 6 months. My dad was a sea captain. He was captain of cargo ships. So, from the age of 6 months to about 3 years old, I was actually living on board the cargo ship with him and my mom. Wow. And when they got off ships in about 1982, they got off and he went off to become a marine lawyer, and my mom actually opened up her own marine recruitment firm specializing in deck and technical officer hires, so more of like the bridge type of positions for cargo and transport ships. And then in the early 2000s, late 1990s, she got into cruise ship recruitment. So that was kind of coincided when I was in university, and she started recruiting for Princess Cruises, and a youth staff position came up. And she said to me, because I'd been working with kids, kind of throughout my high school career, she said, there's this new position that's come up with Princess. Would you be interested? And I just thought, hey, this is awesome. This is a great way where I can travel during my university breaks, still get paid and make money for university, but see the world at the same time. So that's how I kind of fell into it. But I've always wanted to go back to sea because, I've had those roots from a very young age.
Yeah, that's such a cool experience to have as a child. I guess, it's in that age where you probably don't have many memories, but just to have lived for years on a cargo ship in your youth is really interesting.
Yeah, it was actually, and my older brothers and sisters, they got to live on the ship a little bit longer than I did. They were on board till they were about, 6-ish or so. So they definitely have some more, solid memories of the experience. But yeah, I have pictures and things like that. And I think once it's in the blood and the fact that I was literally born with sea legs, I had to actually learn how to walk with no stabilizers on a cargo ship. That sticks with you.
Yeah, definitely. That was actually one of the things that I was curious about. How long does it kind of take working on a cruise ship before you forget that you're moving constantly? Because I was really surprised by how big, when I went on a cruise ship, how big it was, yet I always felt when we were pulling away, and I always knew when we were actually at sea, because you do still feel it moving.
Yeah, I think the thing with cruise ships these days, they are getting so much bigger and taller, and because of that, you feel movement for sure. Most of the large ships also have what's called stabilizers, which are like wings that you don't see, that are underneath the water that keep it a lot more stable than, say, a cargo ship or a container ship because they don't have those. But yeah, you definitely do still feel it. because of that early experience, I guess I kind of lucked out, and I have never been seasick, and I've never had trouble walking on board, even in rough weather. But I think for most people, it takes, a few days to about a week, and you kind of settle into it if you are working on board.
So what was it like, or I guess first question, how old were you when you got that first job as a youth specialist on a cruise ship?
So I was 21, which is really primarily for almost every position on board. You do have to be 21 or over, meet the American age of majority. There are very few positions that the cruise lines will accept at younger than that. So I was 21, and that's kind of the minimum age you need to be in order to apply. But, there's all age ranges that are actually working on board. The oldest other youth staff I actually worked with was in her mid 80s. So, wow. There's a wide age range for sure.
And what was it like, first week living and working on a cruise ship?
Definitely it's busy, right? You're coming to this new environment, and you're getting used to living in a new environment, but you're also getting used to a new job, and a new team. And it is one of those rare times where you actually live and work in the same place. So you're getting used to that. And then you also do have a lot of safety training as well during that first and second week. So it's a very, very busy time initially. But, because I'd already been in university that first year, it was kind of similar to that dorm sort of lifestyle. So it wasn't a huge transition for me. But I think maybe if you were a little bit older and used to your own space and your own apartment, maybe it might be a little bit more of a transition for you.
Yeah. What are the accommodations like for staff?
Yeah, so there's basically 3 tiers of staff that exist working on a cruise ship. So you have your crew members, then you have your staff, and then you have your officers. And that's kind of the order of hierarchy on board. So crew are the bulk of the crew on board, primarily in housekeeping, accommodation, bartenders, things like that. Their accommodation is usually 2 to 4 people per cabin. And everyone has their own bed, and you all would share a washroom. And then at the staff level, you are usually in a 2-berth cabin, so 2 people per cabin with your own washroom to share. And then once you reach the supervisory, managerial, or officer level, then that's where you start to get your single cabins, which is where I got to after 5 years of my 10 years working on board. I started to get an officer level cabin, which was a huge step up for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine that it might get a little bit old after a while, just constantly sharing a room with somebody else.
Yeah, but it's also super fun too, because it's also one of those rare opportunities where you get to live and work with over 55 different nationalities. It's like a microcosm of the entire world in essence. So you might get a chance to room with somebody that's from South Africa or Australia or New Zealand or wherever. So you really get a chance to dive deep into learning about someone else's culture when you're getting to room with all these different crew members. So it's kind of neat in the same way as well.
Yeah, I guess for work visas and stuff, since you're moving from country to country, do cruise ships have to deal with any of that? Or you said it's people from all over the world. How does that work just from a visa standpoint?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So most major cruise lines are based out of the U.S. I would have to say 80% of cruise lines are based out of the U.S. So if you're an American or Canadian crew member, you do not need an additional visa to work on board an American vessel. If you're from any other country, you require what's called a C1D1 visa, which you can obtain from any American consulate, and the cruise line will actually help you to obtain that visa. And that is what allows you to work on board an American ship. And having that visa will enable you to go from country to country, wherever the ship is visiting, without having to abide by local visa requirements, because you're only in for the day or a couple of days.
Okay. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. That makes it a lot easier. It's one of those things that the more we travel and the more we look at it'd be really cool to live here, visas become this really obvious, blatant thing of oh, right, you can't just move anywhere you want in the world.
Right. Yeah, and some visas are definitely harder to obtain, and some countries are definitely it makes it harder to obtain. South Africans just generally they have a hard time or they have to spend more money to get their visas often. And so depending on where you're from, it does make it easier or more difficult when it comes to cruise ship employment. But Canadians, as you know, generally our passport it goes a long way when you're traveling internationally, and it's usually very cheap and very easy relatively to obtain visas. So yeah.
So something that I imagine would happen when you get on the boat is like, especially someone who maybe has less experience, you get a job, you're on a cruise ship. It's kind of like this, holy shit, I'm like living on a boat. I'm moving from country to country. Is that something that I think like people go through when they first get onto a job on a cruise ship?
Yeah, just like getting used to that fact that you're going to all these different places. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Is it like
waking up in a new place?
What are most people like in those first like few weeks while it's like an adjustment process?
You know, it's really interesting. Like a lot of clients of mine, over the last few years, I have a lot of clients on board now, doing their first and even second and third contracts. And, you know, they kind of go through these stages. I think for some of them that maybe it's their first ever time leaving their own country, it can be a huge adjustment period, like learning about the ship life, but also visiting different places and absorbing all of the various cultural, you know, things they're going to come into contact with. Whereas if somebody has already done a little bit of traveling already and then starts life on board, I think it's a lot easier to digest that you are going to be going to sleep every night and waking up potentially in a new country every single morning.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's one of the things that I really loved about the cruise that I did with my family. I would have been like 18. I was in grade 12. But we would travel overnight, and we went to these different Caribbean islands, and each morning was waking up in this new country. And as somebody who loves traveling and was kind of just discovering my love of travel at that point, I was like, this is so cool. Like I was in Antigua yesterday. I'm in Barbados today.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I think the other neat part for the crew members, because I'm glad you had that experience. And the other neat part is when you're a crew member, typically your contracts are about 6 months in duration. And you're going to end up on a similar itinerary for about 3 to 4 months of that contract. And then your ship will most likely relocate and you'll start a new itinerary. But the cool thing is that even if you miss a port, you know, 1 week or the next week, you're always going to come around again, because each cruise generally is only 7 to 10 days for the passenger, but you get to keep doing it over and over again. So you get to really kind of dive, even though you're only there for the day, you get to kind of dive deep into each place, because you do come back week after week for a good chunk of your time.
Yeah. Do you find that with certain places when you're on that same route that you kind of like discover your favorite restaurant there, your favorite coffee shop, or your favorite store to shop at?
Oh yeah. Like I think too, like what started to happen for me, because I worked on board for 10 years, and then I worked for 4 different cruise lines in that time. And sometimes, like I've been to every continent in the world except Antarctica. So there were times and years where I would be like in Australia for 6 months, and then 3 years later I would come back and do the same itinerary with a different cruise line. But I would recognize, you know, people at a coffee shop or people at a restaurant or so it was really neat. It was like coming home again, but like everywhere you stop started to become your home. So I think on my website it even says, you know, like home is where the anchor drops, and it really does become like that.
Yeah. How long do you think the adjustment period is to when it becomes just normal and it's not like, oh, this life that it's actually kind of like interesting, weird, just feels completely normal?
I usually tell my clients, you know, expect to probably hate the first week or two, like, and really ask yourself, you'll probably ask yourself during that first couple of weeks, like, what the heck did I sign up for? After about 30 days, you really start to find your groove and your flow, and you really start appreciating all of the benefits that come with working on board a cruise ship. So I think about 30 to 60 days and you're right in it, because it's 30 to 60 days of you fully being immersed in the lifestyle. So I think that's around how long I've typically seen it take for people to adjust.
What is it that makes the first 10 days or 2 weeks miserable for a lot of people?
I think, you know, you're in this brand new place with all new people in a really different environment than you've probably ever experienced before. you're a long way from home, so you're missing family and friends, and you have a lot of work. You know, not only, again, as I said, are you learning your job, but you're also doing all of this extra safety training, and maybe you're a bit jet lagged. So all of that combined can kind of make that first couple weeks really rough, for sure. That being said, you know, some people really thrive under those circumstances. I have a client of mine right now who's doing his first contract with Royal Caribbean as a crew staff, and he just posted recently on his Facebook on week 2, like how excited and how much fun he was having. So for some people, that hard stuff doesn't even really hit them. So it just kind of depends.
Yeah, I guess it's like if you're one of those like extroverted, energized people, it's probably really interesting. You've got people to talk to all the time and moving from thing to thing. But if you're like a bit more introverted and solitary, and there's no path in the woods to go walk in, and you can't go hide in your apartment because there's people there too, I could imagine that would be a bit whelming.
Yeah, and I think too, like, and that is the thing, right? Like, it's not, working on board is not for everyone. And I'm definitely an introvert myself. Like, I do need my own alone time, and I need the ability to do my own thing. But that being said, I do love interacting with crew members and interacting with guests. So if you're the type of person that really thrives on providing excellent service and traveling, then it is probably going to be for you. But if you're someone who, that really needs their weekends totally alone, then it might not be the right fit.
Yeah. And so where did you go on your very first cruise when you were 21?
Yeah, so my first contract was 3 months. So I did a seasonal contract as youth staff for Princess. So I did June, July, August, and they sent me to the Caribbean. So I did Western, Eastern Caribbean for that first 3 months. So that was my first run. And then all throughout university, so for that first 5 years, I went out every single summer from May right through to early September. And I went out every Christmas break, every Thanksgiving, every spring break. So cumulatively every year throughout my university career, I was on board for about 5 to 6 months of the year.
Wow. And so right off the get-go, you were just like, yes, like I love this.
Yeah. It was so good because so many people I knew that were in university were going home in the summer to work, but half of their money was going to like paying rent or food or just going out. Whereas when you're working on board, you don't have any expenses. Like everything's provided for you. And the only thing maybe that you're having to buy are a few drinks in the crew bar, which are 75 cents to $1.
Wow.
So, you know, it's a wonderful way to save almost everything that you make.
Yeah. That's amazing. And it like to see new places.
Yeah, it just is like a really interesting life experience. Then, you know, most university students are like, oh, I'm going back to my hometown. Maybe I'm working at the same like laboring job that I did in high school. But
sounds like your university.
Yeah, well, that's what I did. But versus like, oh yeah, I'm going to the Caribbean, or like I'm going to like the Mediterranean or something like that. It's just like such an interesting thing to do over the course of that 3-4 months.
Well, and I think too, the cool thing for me anyway is at the time, because I was doing 5 years of uni, because I was doing a double degree in 4 years, and then I did another degree in teaching. For me, the youth staff experience initially was like really relatable experience to my education degree and what I was planning on using and submitting for my application to the education program. So that was another great, you know, benefit, was like not only was I getting paid and I was getting travel experience, but I was also actually getting work related experience for, at that time, my desired profession.
Yeah. So I want to get into that a little bit, about like kind of the various roles and things people do on the cruise ship. But first, you mentioned the crew bar, and that's something that really interests me, is like the social dynamic of the people who work on the cruise ship, because they're probably, it's kind of like the flight attendants on a plane. You don't really think about them and like what's actually going on in their lives while they're there, but there's a whole world that you don't see. What's the like social life like for people working on a cruise ship?
I guess in a word, it's just awesome. It's like, most of the time on most ships, you're going to have anywhere from 600 to 1,500 crew members, all on the same boat, excuse the pun. And you're all there to work hard, but you're all there to play hard too. There's like primarily one crew bar, and there's also typically sometimes an officer's bar, but really you don't even have to call your friends when you want to go out. Like everyone's going to the same place.
Yeah. It's like that small town feeling where it's like everyone's at the bar.
Exactly. So you don't even have to call anyone. You're like, I feel like going out tonight. So, if you go out, you're going to run into everyone. So that part's really, really neat. And then there's other components as well that come with that and other benefits depending on the level of staff that you come in. If you come in as a crew or a staff as an officer, sometimes you also have the added benefit of going to some of the passenger areas as well and going to like the passenger bar or the passenger lounges and going to see the shows and going to the specialty restaurants and things like that. So, it's a really awesome downtime opportunities that you get to have on board as well.
And is it the type of thing where you're so busy with work that you don't spend a lot of time hanging out, that most of the downtime is spent relaxing, or do people party a lot? Do people socialize a lot?
Oh, people party a lot, a lot. And actually it can get, you got to be a little bit careful with it too, because every single night there'll be a party. And so you have to, kind of pace yourself, especially initially when you first join. You can kind of get swept up in this because when you do first join, everyone will welcome you with open arms. Like literally you'll meet people and the next day they'll be your best friend. And that's really how the whole crew works. It's a really wonderful family feel. At the same time, it can be easy to get swept up in that party atmosphere. It is something to definitely be cognizant of for sure, because you can't party that hard for a full 6 months. It could be a little hard to keep that up.
Yeah, I mean, being hungover on a boat too isn't.
You got fresh air though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But people also work on like rotational schedules, right?
Yeah. So everyone on board will work 7 days a week, no matter what. So it doesn't matter what position you are, you're going to be working 7 days a week. Some positions definitely work a lot less than others. So international labor law and international IMO law, which is international maritime law, specifies that crew members can work a maximum of 14 hours per day. That's the law, and that's the max. Now, does that typically happen all the time? No. Typically, most crew members are going to work in the 8 to 12 range, typically. A lot of split shifts, like 3 to 4 hour split shifts. 3-hour split shifts kind of thing, typically depending on the department that you're with. So that's kind of how work hours go. And then when it comes to off time, again, there's definitely different departments that have a lot more off time than others. For example, retail sales and casino, those areas must be shut when in port. It's actually illegal for them to be open. So those two departments have amazing port time because they're literally not allowed to work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was
so
thinking
is that
about,
just like the countries have this like regulation about like business, they're kind of become like businesses in whatever country they're docked in, so that's why they've got to shut down?
Right. Yeah. And so like maybe you'll have like a little bit of stock work or something like that, but generally speaking, if you're in those departments, you're going to have amazing port time. Or same for the youth staff where I worked. We might have a team of 25 youth staff and the youth centers are open in port, but most of the kids are off in port enjoying the sights with their parents. So we might only have 1 or 2 staff members within the centers, which meant the rest of us were off in port enjoying the sights and going on free tours that the cruise line paid for.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that we got onto that because I was thinking about when you first talking about what you did and stuff, I was thinking about how it's like my experience on a cruise ship was obviously so different than working there because I was on this vacation and every time we docked, I got to go and I got to come and go as I pleased. But it's this reminder that yes, you're going cool places, but you are still working. Somebody cleans your bedroom while you're out enjoying the day, which means that they don't get to enjoy that place.
Exactly. But that's why it's so great that you're always coming, like as a crew member, you're always coming back to that place. Cause even if you miss it 1 week, you're probably going to catch it the next week or the week after, like worst case.
Yeah. So is it like 7 days on and then like a couple days off, or how does that, or is it just like you get hours off per day?
Yeah, it's crazy. There's pretty much no turnover time when it comes to guests coming on and off. So the end of, say, the 7-day cruise will end, and all of the guests will get off that morning, and all of the new guests will get on that same afternoon. So it's the turnaround day, as we call it, where all the guests are doing that transfer, is crazy. It's probably one of the busiest days for everyone. There is no rest time between cruises.
So then as someone who's working on the cruise, you don't really get many days off to yourself.
You don't ever get a 24-hour period off, but you would say, like when I was youth staff, for example, I would get 1 to 2 half days or 1 full day from when the ship came in to when the ship set sail that evening. I would get it off. And then if that did happen for me, I would have to work that night, say 3 to 4 hours. But then when I was promoted to crew trainer and then HR manager for the last 5 years of my 10 years on board, I made my own schedule. So I made sure I got every port day off.
That's awesome. So it's kind of like if you put your time into it, then there's like some major perks after the first like couple years of working hard.
Oh yeah, there's huge perks. I mean, your salary doubles, triples, quadruples. You have a lot more autonomy then. You're able to, make and create your own schedules. So yeah, there are some huge benefits to getting in, say at an entry level, and working your way up. Or if you're somebody with even more experience shoreside that relates, then there are opportunities to come in at a supervisory managerial level often.
Awesome.
Yes, so if you're someone who is like, young, likes to travel, thinking about, it could be a fun adventure to work on a cruise ship, what are kind of like some of the roles that are open to someone who doesn't have too much relevant experience? Maybe you've worked retail or been a server or something like that.
Yeah, I'd have to say the top 5 that I would recommend. One would be youth staff for sure, because almost everyone has some experience with youth in a large organizational setting at some point, like summer camp or day camp or whatever. That's a great entry level role, not only because a lot of people have that experience, but also because you can go on with some cruise lines as a seasonal staff member for anywhere from 2 to 12 weeks, kind of test the waters and see if you like it before committing to a longer term contract. The next one I would say would probably be retail, because like a lot of people have experience in that, but also you get a lot of your port days off, which is a huge plus. Maybe hotel front desk is another one that's quite easy to break into if you have some of that experience. Cruise staff is another one, which is cruise activity staff. Those are the people that host and facilitate activities for adults on board. And then the last one would probably be photo video. If you do have some photo or video experience, either studio or freelance, that's another kind of great break-in role, because all of the departments that I've just mentioned are relatively large departments, and you're coming in at a staff and or officer level, so you have benefits kind of coming out right out of the gate.
Awesome. That's great. I feel like I'd want to work in retail.
Yeah.
2 years at Lululemon. I've got it.
What do you think the worst job is on the cruise ship?
The worst job. I don't know if there's a worst job. I think there's definitely some really hard jobs. Probably hit squad or garbage
Hit squad.
is probably like 2 of the hardest. Yeah. So
I hope
hit
that's
squad,
not as nefarious as it sounds.
Hit squad are the people that deal with, like seasickness. So if a passenger, has an incident in a hallway or something, they're the ones that have to like wear the full body suits and go and deal with that. That probably wouldn't be super fun.
Yeah, I was thinking garbage, but yeah, hit squad also doesn't sound very nice.
Are you guys killing people on there? What's happening?
It sounds like that.
Yeah, so in 10 years on the cruise ship, did you have any experiences where, like, you hear about the things where, like, everyone's got Norwalk. Were you on any ships where a whole bunch of people started getting sick?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I was on multiple ships where that happened. I think what a lot of people need to remember is, like, when they report Norwalk in the media, they show it as like this huge, crazy big deal. But the fact of the matter is, Norwalk happens a lot more on land than it ever does on cruise ships. Like, Norwalk happens in university dorms like every single week. It happens in hospitals every single week. It happens anywhere where people are living in old age homes or whatever, in close proximity. And so it just so happens that it hits, a cruise ship, and it hits it really hard because everyone's living in this place, and sometimes they're not getting off the cruise ship for a couple of days because maybe it's sailing. So it really travels really fast. And it also lives on services for up to 24 hours. Typically, though, when I have been on ships that have had an outbreak, it's been primarily the passengers that have had the problem. The crew members tend to not have the same level of sickness as the passengers because the crew members know to wash their hands like 20 times a day.
Yeah, because you're dealing with people constantly.
I find that guests maybe aren't that careful. And also guests, when they get sick, have a tendency to not stay in their cabin because they're on vacation. So maybe they go to the medical clinic and they're sick and the doctor says, you need to stay in your cabin. You're quarantined for 4 days, but they're thinking in their head, like, I paid for this whole week cruise. I'm going to freaking enjoy it. So then they leave their cabins and of course then they spread it to other guests.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from our travel experiences, we know that the media blows that stuff up in a disproportional way, but it's definitely like an interesting experience too. I guess especially if you're at like a couple days at sea and a bunch of people are getting sick and you're not like getting off for a couple more days. It'd be like a little bit of an interesting experience.
So then you just have to be more careful and, wash your hands more and yeah, that's pretty much all it comes down to.
I imagine it's the type of thing as a crew member as well where like you probably get onto the cruise ship for the first time and get sick pretty quickly because there's, all these people from all over the world have all these germs and they've all gotten used to it, but you're new and then you get sick. But like once you've been in there for a little while, imagine your immune system's just like bulletproof because you've kind of seen everything. It just like keeps getting tested constantly.
I find actually people tend to get, like when they're new crew members, I find they actually get a little bit sick, not from germs, but from air conditioning, from constantly going in and out of air conditioning. I find that kind of mucks with their respiratory system a little bit initially until they get used to it.
I think that's why I've been getting sick in Asia.
Yeah.
We're not used to that from Canada. I'm curious so you worked on cruise ships in and out of university with this kind of goal to be a teacher. When you graduated, what made you decide to continue the cruise ship life or life at sea?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I finished and I got on the sub list and I was doing all that in BC. And in BC anyway, at that point, it was 2004. There was usually about a 1 to even 3 year wait list to actually get a permanent position teaching, in British Columbia. And, that same year, incidentally, Princess Cruises launched a brand new position called corporate trainer, where they were looking for people with teaching and instructional background that had past cruise ship experience. So I was like, hey, this is like the perfect fit. And not only that, when I actually secured the position, I realized I was actually going to be getting paid like $2,000 more than I would have been as a permanent teacher per month.
Wow.
So
it's pretty significant. It's like $25,000 more a year.
Yeah. This is just one random question because I'm curious. Where do you pay taxes if you work on a cruise ship and it's like an American ship, but you're Canadian, but you never really work in the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a really, it's an interesting question. And it's something I had my accountant on for like 8 of my 10 years at sea. There's actually no definitive hard and fast rules when it comes to what you're supposed to claim to Canada Revenue anyway, because they don't have anything, any information regarding international earnings on a cruise ship specifically. And at that point I was being paid in cash, all cash every month.
Wow.
There were no T4s, there was no records of anything. So basically, my suggestion to clients is always talk to an accountant and then determine, same as say waitresses do, right? Because they get their tips and they have to declare a portion. So, that's kind of what I recommend for Canadians. Americans are taxed they're the only nationality that are taxed, when working for an American company. So they're auto taxed. And then there are other nationalities that they're actually legally allowed to not claim tax. So in Britain, for example, there's a very, very old maritime law that allows British seafarers to legally not claim tax on their earnings at sea.
Wow.
So it depends where kind of from. Yeah.
So if you're British and looking for like a summer job during uni, a cruise ship is like a really good way to do it.
Oh yeah.
That's so interesting. I'm glad you asked that. I never would have thought about that. It's like one of those technicalities that's like, it's there, but yeah, super interesting.
And then also, like, I think too, when I took into account, not only would I be making more than I would as a teacher, but also I'd have no expenses. I'd have no rent. I'd have no groceries. I'd have no car bill, gas, whatever. Like, that was what I was making, almost double, and I had no expenses. So within that first full-time year working as a crew trainer in year 5, I paid off over $35,000 in student loans in that 1 year. I paid off everything. I have no student loan because I paid it off in that 1 year working full-time.
That's incredible. Yeah. I never thought of like the cruise ship industry as a place where you can make a lot of money. Like, I guess that just not knowing about kind of the back end of it, I just assumed it was like you work long hours, you get these benefits of like meeting cool people and traveling, but you probably make like minimum wage.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, most entry-level positions, you're going to be coming in somewhere between the 12 and 1800 range per month. Which I know sounds really low to a lot of people probably listening, but when clients ask me about this, I ask them the simple question: after you pay all of your expenses every single month, do you save free and clear anywhere near $1,000 a month?
Yeah. I mean, if you get paid like $4,000 from your job and you pay, like, after you take out tax, CPP, EI, all that other stuff.
Rent, groceries.
Just that stuff. You're getting like probably like 22, 23, 2,400 cash on your paycheck. And then you pay $800 for rent and
at least
$100 for car insurance and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're probably not even anywhere close to taking home $1,800 a month.
Exactly, right? So, and then you tack on like, oh, I'm also going to be in a new country every day. And my drinks, if I do go out, are $1. It's all good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So what are some of the things that are great about working on a cruise ship that people don't expect?
They don't expect.
Because everyone expects like, oh, I'm going to be traveling from country to country. This is kind of romantic. It's a cool community. But what's kind of a unthought of perk?
I think probably unthought of is definitely what Amanda brought up, the money and the potential for making and saving a ton of money. A second one would be promotional opportunities. I don't think a lot of people going into this realize what amazing promotional options are available to people when they do get on board, and how relatable they'll be to whatever job you come back to when you are ashore. And a third one, I think just the ability to really immerse yourself in what I said before, the microcosm of the world. It's one of the only places I know of that you have the ability to work with so many different nationalities and absorb their culture in one place and learn so much. It really, really benefits you later in life when and if you do decide to come ashore eventually.
Yeah, I guess the networking would be really interesting because you probably end up with people you can visit in almost like every developed country around the world.
Oh yeah, developed, undeveloped. I mean, you have friends from Indonesia or the Philippines or South Africa. So yeah, I mean, you do make such amazing, really close friendships when you're working on board, and you know that when you're on your leave, because typically it's 6 months on, 2 months off, 6 months back on again. During that 2 months off, a lot of people just spend their time traveling in that time and just visiting different people they know all around the world.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that.
Yeah, we actually met someone who, when we were in Thailand doing our scuba diving, he was a masseuse on cruise ships, and it was on and off period and was in Thailand teaching scuba diving.
Yeah.
And was going to go back to doing it afterwards.
Yeah, he had an interesting life. He was one of the first people I met where I was like, whoa.
Yeah, it's like we just came out of university and we were like, okay, you finish university, you get a job, and we met this guy and we're like, whoa, there's a whole different way of approaching this thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's the other benefit, right? Like maybe even if you start on cruise ships and your whole goal is, I'm going to go on board for 1 or 2 years and just make some money and pay off some student debt and then go back to real life and get that proper job my parents want me to get and go back to the real world. I think it's an amazing opportunity to go on board and meet people that are doing it differently and meet people that are planning on doing that long term as a career, and realizing that you can kind of have it all without having to work in the cubicle for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So we kind of talked a little bit about like unexpected benefits. I know on a cruise ship, as a passenger, you probably get the feeling like, oh, everything's, running smoothly. Everything's going great. It's nice and luxurious. But I imagine there's probably like crazy stuff that happens on the back end occasionally. Are there any stories that jump to mind of like a kind of crazier experience you had working on the cruise ship?
Yeah, there's definitely a few. So progressionally, like when I worked on board, I started as youth staff, and then I did like about a year or two in security before I moved into training. And then I was in HR. So definitely throughout all of those positions, I came across a multitude of,
yeah, I imagine HR would be a good one for that.
Oh yeah. Dealing with, 1,200 crew members' life problems definitely, brings a whole new meaning to, interesting circumstances. But, I would have to say, yeah, maybe going back to the HR, I had an incident where this one gentleman had a wife who, this happens a lot. Like you get on board, you meet someone awesome, maybe you get married, and then sometimes if you both continue working on ships, there are times where sometimes you might end up working on a different ship, just depending on what the company needs. Sometimes that does happen. But I got this amazing news for this one particular crew member that his wife had succeeded in her application to be transshipped from the ship she was on to our ship, the ship that her husband was on, which was super exciting. I thought he would be really, really stoked for that. So I called him into my office to tell him the good news that his wife was arriving the following week. And he told me that that couldn't happen because his fiance was already on board.
What?
So that was a bit of a kerfuffle. So we had to get the fiance. So that turnaround day, I had to get the fiance transshipped because the wife was already on her way. She was already in the air. So yeah, that was an interesting time.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Cruise ship love gone wrong, and it happens, it does. It's very, very intense, right? Like your relationships when you meet people, and I guess romantic relationships too. It can be that's the other hard thing too, right? Like maybe you meet someone wonderful, you date for a couple of months, then you break up, but you're still living and working in the same place. So it's brings a new dynamic to having to kind of go on when that sort of romantic thing happens.
Yeah, that would make it like super uncomfortable, I guess, in that situation, especially if you've got like your crew area, like you've got your crew area where you eat and where you go to drink, and you probably have like all these friends intermingled in rooms and stuff.
The people you like them so much more because you get to spend time together, but the people you dislike, you probably dislike a lot stronger because you're constantly around them and can't avoid them as much.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely a con, but it's also a pro, right? Because you don't have that ability to just run away and ignore the person, especially if you're working in the same department as that person. So my job when I was in HR was often sometimes bringing those parties together within my office and speaking to them frankly about like, how are we going to work through this? Like you guys aren't together anymore. You're working both in the same department. How are we going to move forward with the rest of your contract, which sometimes was another few months.
Yeah.
So you had to deal with it. So that's where that you did learn additional life skills, right? Because you really had to deal with those things. You couldn't just run away and just not call the person ever again.
Yeah, that would be challenging for sure. I'm curious what like the relationships are like between crew or staff and people on the cruise ship. Like, did you ever get to know anyone really well on the cruise ship? Like, what's that dynamic like since it's like switching over every couple of weeks?
So guest wise, yeah, I mean, I think you do get to know the guests relatively well. I think it somewhat depends on the department you're in. When I was in youth staff, I got to know the kids really well because they were with me almost every single day. Security, you get to know people really well as well. Sometimes not in their best states. And then when I moved into training in HR, I was really more on the crew side of things, dealing with the crew. So I didn't deal with guests pretty much at all at that level. But you do, depending on the department, really do get a chance to chat with guests and get to know them. And there are a lot of crew members even that make friends with guests and visit guests when they're off the ship and things like that. That does happen for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just wondering because like I kind of briefly mentioned earlier, I worked for Lululemon for a couple of years, so I was in retail, and I found like my relationships with staff were really good, especially because we lived in Banff, so it was a super small town. Kind of reminds me of the cruise ship atmosphere a little bit. It's like people dating, breaking up. You can go out every night if you want to. You can not if you don't want to, type thing. But I found that it was like I'd have these really great conversations with people, and then it's like they're gone. You know, they've come in, they've done their shopping, and then they leave, and I like never see them again. And from all over the world as well.
And that does happen. And again, it depends on the size of ship too. Like if one of my clients right now is on the Oasis, Royal Caribbean ship, and it has like almost over 5,000 guests. You might be on a cruise for a whole week working, and you might not even, you're not going to meet every single guest that is on that week, just because there's so many people. And so that's why I think it's important to just make every guest experience that you do meet really exceptional, because really every single crew member on board a ship with any company, you are the face of the company when you do have that one-on-one, face-to-face with any guest. So that's the part of the training job that I love so much, was, really like helping crew to realize that they were so, so important to the success of the company, no matter how small their position.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super interesting. And I'm curious, what was like one of your favorite places that you got to go to while you were working on the cruise ships?
I think my favorite place, or one of my favorite places, was probably Vanuatu. It's a island nation made up of over 100 different islands in the South Pacific. And I got to go to quite a few of the islands when I was working with P&O Australia, and I really, really enjoyed it because the islands themselves were very, as of yet, undeveloped, and you really got to enjoy the authentic feel of the island culture. And there weren't any like big box stores or chain restaurants or bars that sometimes you find in really big cruise ports in the Caribbean. So those were some of my favorite places for sure. And then some of the other just places I know I'll probably may not get a chance to go back to, like Greenland and Iceland and places like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. What's Greenland like?
There was not much there when we stopped.
A lot of ice and land.
Yeah, there is a very small Inuit community. I say Inuit because I guess that's what we say in Canada, but I guess for lack of a better word, like First Nations or a native community. So that was pretty much all that was there. But it was just really cool to be on Greenland and say, wow, like this is somewhere I probably never would have gone if I hadn't been working on ships.
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah, I think we've flown over it, but that's about all.
Yeah, it's definitely like you're not going to connect through there. There's never like, oh, a hot deal. Weekend trip to Greenland.
Hot deal to Greenland. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, tourism Greenland's not really promoting their things to do, but I mean, like any land mass on Earth, I feel like it's got beauty and culture and interesting things to experience. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think too, that's something to really consider when you're looking at all the different cruise lines to work for. A great thing to do is kind of assess, like, where is it that you want to go specifically? Are you looking for more of the untouched, smaller places that not a lot of the big ships are going into? Because if that's the case, then maybe you want to work for a line like P&O Australia that only has a handful of ships that are smaller that can get into those places. Or maybe you want to work for a cruise line that has ships all over the world so that moving forward, if you stay with that line for a few years, you are going to get a chance to go literally everywhere. So that's something to kind of think about when you're picking a line.
Yeah, I think people will probably, I mean, this is kind of how I come to it. I think like, oh, cruise ship. And I think, gigantic ship going from tropical destination to tropical destination. But the way it's going, there's like, there's Antarctic cruises, there's Arctic cruises, there's lots that go to remote places that you never really get to go to unless you're on a cruise. So there's a whole different range of it, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And there's like sailing cruise ships like Windstar, which is a cruise ship, but it's very, very small, like only 200 to 400 guests, and they have like sailing they're mechanical sails, I guess is a good way to explain it. really, really high end. They stop in really small places that really there aren't any airports and you wouldn't get a chance to go to unless you sailed there. And then of course there's the big, 20-story, cruise ships that, that they're going to go to Cozumel or Playa del Carmen or some of the more popular, or Alaska. Like Alaska season's almost starting. We're getting into May. A lot of cruise lines, about half of their fleet end up doing Alaska from May to September. Wow. So Alaska is super popular. Yeah.
So you reached a point around 10 years in the cruise industry where you, or working actually on the ship, where you transitioned off. What was that decision like? What kind of led up to you being like, okay, I'm ready to get off a boat?
I think, for me personally, how old was I? I think I was about 33-ish, almost. I think for women on board, you kind of, depending on the role that you're in, I was at my top tier level at that point. I was a 3-stripe HR manager, which is the highest level you can get to other than being, passenger services director. And so I knew I wasn't going to be going any higher departmentally. And I was making great money and I was loving the job, but I also realized that I had a choice at that point to try shore life for a little bit and think about potentially having a family, because I did notice with women on board, especially in higher level officer roles, there tended to be a gap between women ages 35 to about 45. You didn't really see women in that age range on board typically, like not a lot of them. And that typically was because they either, they typically went home and met their partner and had families, and then sometimes they would come back, or they made the choice to, stay on board and give up that aspect of shore life. So I did decide to give shore life a try for 3 to 4 months. That was what I was thinking I was going to do, take longer than my 2-month leave. I still had a job to go back to. P&O Australia was still expecting me to come back after 4 months. But I got off the ship and then I met my husband within 12 weeks of being ashore. So that was kind of the end of that. And I met him here in Revelstoke. And, because I wanted to take a season snowboarding, because I had missed snowboarding, so much when I was on the ships, because I couldn't really do it that much when I was on leave. So I'm like, no, I'm going to take a whole winter season and do that. And I met him, and he's a mountain guide. So that's where we're at now. But I still stayed after I got off ships. I still stayed within the industry, recruiting for one of Canada's, official partners for Princess. So I still was in the industry for another 6 years. And then 2 years ago was when I started my own company, which is the getalifeatsea.com. Just because I noticed a huge gap in information for people trying to break into the industry, and find their pathway to getting on board.
Okay. Awesome. So you have been off the ship, like on shore now for 8 years. Is that right?
Yeah. I got off in 2010. So I guess seven years.
Okay.
This year. Yeah.
Awesome. And then can you tell us a little bit about the business that you've created?
Yeah. So basically, initially when I started my business, I was just going to write like a how to get a job on a cruise ship guide, which I do have, which has like all of the main cruise lines contact links and their employment links and step-by-step application instructions. That was what I initially planned to do and what I did. But once I did that, I started getting emails from people that wanted one-on-one coaching, and they wanted help with their resumes, and they wanted, consultation on their resumes as well. So now I offer all of that as well. I offer resume consultations, resume creation packages, and one-on-one coaching. So it's kind of expanded. And then as of the end of April, I'm actually launching a Cruise Ship Jobs 101 course, online course that provides, adventurers with like everything they need to know about the industry, about every single position, about salary, pay structures, how to apply, how to design their resume, literally everything they need to know from point one to walking up the gangway and being on board. So yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
That's awesome.
It's really cool that you took like all these years of experience and created this business. It's like great sales funnel. It's really like serving a need in the industry. I think that's amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. And, I am still doing a little bit of recruitment here and there, and I haven't totally left recruitment, but I just really wanted to serve people because having been in recruitment for, 6 years after I got off ships, I would go through 500 to 1,000 emails a day, applications a day. Wow. And I know that there were great applicants that I was deleting because they were missing little things. They maybe didn't have the right job objective. They didn't highlight the right things on their resume. And unfortunately, I didn't have time to email them back and tell them what was wrong. I just had to go to the next email. And I wanted to provide help to those people that maybe were missing just something small, or maybe direct them to a position they didn't even know about that would be a better fit for them. So those are the people that I help now. And now it's wonderful. I have dozens of clients that I've helped that are living their dreams on board right now. So it's super exciting.
Yeah. What are kind of the commonalities of the people you work with? Are these people who just want to find an interesting job for maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years, and just have this experience, or are they people who really want to work long term in the cruise industry?
It's interesting. I kind of have a wide range. I have some younger clients. I have quite a few older clients as well that are more experienced, that are going for higher level, officer level positions, and just want somebody on the inside to review their already good resume and make it even better so that they can guarantee themselves a position. So I really do have a range, but what I can tell you is that most of my clients do more than just the one contract. Most of my clients are on their second and third contracts right now. So, from what I gather, I tend to attract people that are looking at this as something of a bit of a career.
Yeah. And is that pretty common outside of your clients, of people who go to work on cruise ships, that they find themselves renewing contracts way past they initially thought they would?
Yes. I think once you get on board and you get stuck into the lifestyle, when you do come ashore for your leave for that 6 to 8 weeks, real life doesn't really do it for you anymore. It's like you need that constant change, and you crave that variety and the multiculturalism. And I don't know, it is really the adjustment period to living life on shore is actually, I would say, longer than the adjustment when you're getting on board.
Yeah, cool. I think me and Amanda can relate to that. Not from the cruise ship perspective, but just travel perspective, where have a 6-month trip and then get back and are takes us 12 months to adjust, and then once we've adjusted, we're no, we can't do this anymore. We need to leave.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to my parents the other day, just telling them about life in Asia and life in Bali. And then they're like, oh yeah, that sounds interesting type thing. And I'm going to have some serious reverse culture shock when I get back after 9 months in Asia, fully used to what Asia is like.
Right. And then it's what I found too, and you'll probably relate when you go back, it's when you do go back and everyone wants to know how it's been, it's hard not to sound like kind of a jerk when you get home, right? You're oh, and I saw this, and then I went here, and I did this, and that's just was your job, to go and experience all these amazing things and go to all these fantastic places. And, it is a bit difficult, because also when you're home on leave, everyone else is still working, and you have a full 2 months to do whatever you want. So you're always free, and your job is to relax. There are very few jobs as well, I find, in the world where you get 4 months off a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, teaching, I guess. It's probably the only one that comes close to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you help people with does your business sort of help people with that readjustment back offshore? Is that a portion of what you do as well, or?
I think it probably will become that. And now I've only been in business now just 2 years. So I think I haven't had any of my clients come off ships yet. So I feel like once that starts to happen, yeah, I probably will get some of my clients saying, what's the next step or what do you recommend here? And then, yeah, I'll obviously just kind of direct them where I think would be best. But really, once you get off a ship, once you finish working with a major line, it's your gold ticket to working in any 5-6-star hotel or resort anywhere in the world, really.
Yeah, I guess you've worked like for this really prestigious luxury cruise
just
line.
Way more intensive as well, being on a cruise ship. So if you can handle that, you can obviously handle the hotel.
Exactly. Like they know you know how to work hard because they know you've worked 7 days a week every day for your whole contract. And they know you know what a high level of service is like because you worked for a major cruise line. So it is your gold ticket. And often I find people coming off ships will come home and go into positions that are often a level or two higher than what they left in.
Amazing. That's really cool. That's definitely something that I wouldn't have thought about as like coming away from a cruise ship job with.
Yeah, but it doesn't make sense because you're working probably like twice as much, so you're cramming that much experience into a much shorter time.
And you're gaining access to free training as well. Like all of the major lines provide you with absolutely free professional development training, leadership training, managerial training, like internationally certified HR training. Like all of that is free for you on board and provided to you free of charge. So you get to gain all these additional certifications as well that would cost you thousands if you're going to do it ashore.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, one last question. Is it pretty, are like skilled people in the service industry in demand for cruise ships, or is it hard to get a job? If you're someone who's like 24 and you've had experience in the service industry, something you consider, is it pretty hard to get a job?
No, it's not hard to get a job if you know exactly what to specify in your resume as your objective and exactly what to highlight appropriately, and also exactly how to and who to apply. I think that's probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks a lot of my clients initially find before they find me is they start applying to the lines directly without knowing the backdoor recruitment routes that they can take to actually get noticed. And actually get into the inboxes of the people that are higher up in the recruitment tier than just the initial email reviewers that tend to look at those bulk emails coming into the cruise line's mainframe. So what I provide my clients with is a specific strategy just for them based on their background, their experience, and the country that they're in too, to get them noticed with the right line. That's the trick.
Yeah. Wow. That's super interesting. So if people want to find out more about what you do, Amanda, where can they go? Yeah,
people can check out my website. It's www.getalifeatsea.com. And of course, I've got, all my information there, my services, my contact page is there. They can also find me anywhere on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, LinkedIn, Instagram. I also have a great YouTube channel as well, with I think I have over 33 videos at this point with all, great information about how to get started and what life is like on board and things like that. So everywhere people can search me just by searching Get a Life at Sea. And if people want to take a free 30-second quiz to find out if a life at sea is for them, they can go to my website again at getalifeatsea.com/cruise ship quiz.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. It was awesome getting to chat with you.
Thanks so much for having me, you guys.
So hopefully everyone enjoyed that interview with Amanda. It was super interesting for us to learn about what a life at sea is like and what the cruise ship industry is like. And if you want to get a free copy of her guide, she's offering a special 50% promo, and the promo code for that is Get Paid to Travel, and you can get it at www.getalifeatsea.com. And there's also a link in the show notes. As always, thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at WorldWanderers1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.